How's it going, everybody? I'm Ryan, he's Abby, we're the Expansion Bros, and man, oh man, do we have a trade to talk about. Luka Doncic is now an LA Laker.
Not what you were expecting, was it?
Oh my god, the trades are flying though. Like, I'm going to bed, trades are blowing up on my phone, I wake up, there's more trades. It's trade season, not for the Sabres, but the Canucks have been an active participant in this latest trade frenzy, and I think a lot of teams are trying to get it done before the Four Nations tournament coming up here in a little bit, so it's an exciting time. Get the guys in early, right? The trade deadline, I feel like, is so late to really install some players into a team. But, I mean, Tocchet and you guys are going to have quite a bit of work to do to install a good amount of players and really lean into a brand new number one center. Not brand new, you familiar household name, but Abby, these trades, what are we doing? How are we feeling? Are we good? Bad?
It depends which trades we're talking about. If we want to start with the basketball, I think this is the equivalent. We were talking a little bit before the podcast. This is the equivalent for people who maybe aren't so familiar with basketball. It'd be like if the Canucks traded Quinn Hughes, Vinny Desharnais, and if they still had him, and Phil DiGiuseppe to the Lightning in exchange for Kucherov, JJ Moser, and a first-round pick.
Absolutely mind-blowing stuff. Like, it doesn't you don't trade away a guy like Quinn Hughes. And we'll speak on that in a bit here, but we're talking maybe 43s out in Vancouver should things really hit the fan. I don't want to see that happen.
I'll stop watching hockey. Don't you dare say another word.
Listen, I know a team that loves acquiring offensive-minded left-handed defensemen, so they'd be all over it.
You could give us Tuck, Thompson, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, Devin Levi, and 21 first-round picks, and I'd still say no.
Well, it's the kind of cornerstone that you build around, and I think, steering this conversation back to hockey, I think the Canucks picked their cornerstone. We were talking that Elias Pettersson is a perfect get for the Sabres, and I think there's a competent package the Sabres could send for a guy like Elias Pettersson, and there's no way in heck that JT Miller was ever going to waive his no-trade clause to come to Buffalo, but instead, the Canucks traded Miller. Now, there were talks on both of them, active reports from everywhere, from everyone, that both guys were being shopped around, and they went with the Miller trade because, Miller waived his no-trade clause. Elias Pettersson's younger. Elias Pettersson might have more upside. I don't know. I think they made the right call on which guy to go with. But, I mean, if Pettersson wasn't feeling pressure before, I'm sure he's feeling a lot of extra pressure right now.
Oh, for sure. And I think, you look at the fan base, and the fan base is very, very split on this, right? If you're looking at this just in terms of the numbers, Pettersson makes the most sense in terms of he is far younger. Like you said, has the high upside. Selke, 100-point upside, right? Even JT Miller's, he's a 31, 32-year-old player, signed until he's 37, 38. And while his cap hit's very, very reasonable, and especially with the cap going up, will become a steal. At this point, it makes sense to build your team around Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson. Now, if Pettersson continues not to perform, we may see him shipped off as well in the offseason. That's a potential draft day deal before that no-trade clause kicks in. So we'll see how this season goes. But as far as whether I think this was the right move or not, I obviously have a little bit of a bias towards JT Miller. Met him a couple times in real life. His daughters played t-ball and hockey with my nephews. He was always very, very nice to me. So you might know where I lean. But overall, in terms of just looking at the raw ages, the upside, and kind of even the team fit potentially, where Miller may not have been coming across so well within the locker room, it probably makes sense to stick with Pettersson in this market.
And I think that's kind of been the knock on JT Miller his whole career is, I don't know if the dude's like overly competitive and doesn't know how to channel it properly, but this is now the third time he's been traded, technically his third team, but like the fourth time he's new to a team, right? He got traded, I think, from New York to Tampa.
Yes.
And then from Tampa to you guys. And then now from you guys back to New York. So in a couple of years, I think we'll see him find his way back to Tampa.
And then he can retire a Canuck.
Yeah, there you go. But I think, a lot of the things are like great player, awesome on ice, whatever. But the locker room impacts are just not worth what he provides, right? He's not McDavid, he's not Crosby, he's not Ovechkin. He's an elite player in the league, a great player that can do it all for you as a first line center. But at the end of the day, if it comes at the expense of some of your other stars and the off ice issues, that's part of the reason why I'm leaning to, hey, keeping Pettersson was the right move. I was really, really hoping you guys traded us Pettersson, because I think Pettersson, I think he just, well, first of all, maybe needed to just get out of there. Now that JT Miller's gone, we'll see if that fixes Pettersson's issue. I'm actually a little skeptical that it does. I'm hopeful, obviously hopeful, but personally, I don't know if, like, hey, I'm still in my same situation, but somebody else is gone. Does that make you feel better versus, like, I just get to leave Vancouver behind? Like, I know there's a lot of good people and friends, but just, like, the locker room, the contract, JT, like, it's all somewhere else in the country, right? If he got traded to Buffalo or Columbus, some of the potential spots he could have landed, right? That's, like, completely different part of the country. Like, I don't even have to think about Vancouver more than twice a year, and I go there once. So would have maybe, shaken up his mindset a little bit. But I think, if this does fix everything, that Pettersson could be back to the player that he was just a few seasons ago.
Yeah, I'll say a couple things first on JT Miller as far as off-ice issues. I don't really know if I want to characterize it as that, because there's been a couple different interviews where, yes, maybe it's actually, I wouldn't even say off-ice, it's more on-ice issues in terms of conflict, where, again, I think it was famous a couple of years ago, he was yelling at Casey DeSmith for not leaving the net properly, or, again, any sort of conflict with Pettersson. As far as that goes, but off the ice, as far as the teammate goes, and as a father and such, he's been, from what I hear, excellent. Right, whenever the team wants to get together, it's at JT Miller's house. JT Miller is probably one of the most social kind of people in terms of with his teammates. Him and his wife were involved in many charitable efforts in Vancouver, and just in general, again, off the ice, JT Miller probably actually was very, very good for the team. It's more the on the ice conflict where, or maybe in the practice rink, perhaps is the
around the ice.
Around the ice, where the issues may have been. As far as Pettersson feeling better about the situation, I think you're right in terms of, you're not really escaping your situation. Yes, maybe the factor that was the most kind of strenuating has been removed, but you're right. It could absolutely be a thing of, like, I'm here and I still kind of feel down, and now the fan base is on me, right? So his play may not improve. I'm hoping it does as well. But the other thing worth mentioning, at least in terms of the Pettersson trade, is that Pettersson apparently made it very clear that he does actually want to stay in Vancouver, for what that's worth. So I think we see a higher chance of him either bouncing back, or even if he doesn't bouncing back, staying here because he wants to be here. And then obviously, starting July 1st, his no trade clause kicks in. So at that point, if they want to deal him, it'll be a little more complicated.
And I think that's huge, right? This is probably as much of a prove it period as a guy on an 8-year contract could get, right? He's got, 3-4 months to prove it that he is the number one franchise center. Otherwise, they may look to go in a different direction. And, like, you'll get a haul for a guy like Elias Pettersson. I mean, the trade we've been talking about, right, is Cousins, Byram plus, or Power plus. Right, something like that is what everybody's been talking about, and I think Buffalo would be willing to revisit those talks in the summer, right, before July 1st kicks in, and Pettersson can say, no, I don't want to leave. So it's put up or shut up time for Elias Pettersson, and I think we'll see him bounce back. We'll see what happens. I'd also like to see you guys play a little bit faster. I know that's one of the talking points, the Sabres fans are talking about, is Pettersson's knee the crux of the issue, right? I think it's like he's suffering from knee tendonitis. And is he just not the skater he used to be? But when you look at the team, like, year over year, the Canucks last year, the Canucks this year, right? You look at the edge metrics, they're way down this year. NHL Edge, their NHL's new advanced stats thing to track skating and all that good stuff. If you compare, like, 23-24 Vancouver to 24-25 Vancouver, the team as a whole is certainly slower. So I think it might just be a systematic thing. It could just because the construction, and they've done a lot to change that roster construction. I know we're kind of burying the lead. There's more trades to talk about. There's another deal, a big one too, which you used assets from this JT Miller trade, which we'll get into, to acquire more. I mean, really, you guys did as much of a roster overhaul in January or February, whenever the trades happen, right? As you really could.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, you look at the players in, players out. I believe we had 4 or 5 roster players essentially leaving the team, and we had an additional it'll be another 4 coming in. So you're right. It's a big shift to the team, and JT Miller in particular, right, is such a big part of the team in terms of he always drove his own line. So seeing how that changes how the Canucks lineup is constructed, right? Because before you had Pettersson with Linus, Karlsson, and Höglander, and you don't necessarily have the star power now to where you can have Besser and Pettersson apart. So that's something where, we'll see. It'll be their first game with their players intact today against, I believe it is either Detroit or Dallas. Let's see.
I believe it is Dallas.
Detroit.
Oh, all right.
Sorry, Dallas was the last game.
Yes.
Yes. So I'll be curious to see. Right now on Daily Faceoff, it looks like they are putting DeBrusk, Pettersson, and Besser together. So basically, they've just inserted Pettersson into that Miller slot. And then I should say the pieces we actually got in this JT Miller trade. So the official deal was JT Miller, Eric Brandstrom, and then I'm forgetting the name of the last defenseman we sent over.
Jackson Dorrington.
And then in exchange, we got a top 13 protected first-round pick from the New York Rangers, Philip Hedl, and prospect defenseman Victor Mancini. As far as each of those things go, the first-round pick, I'm actually not going to go into it too much, but
because you don't have it anymore.
Exactly, they don't have it anymore. But I know the protection was a bit of a case for the Canucks, and given what happened to it, it might be a bit confusing as to why, but I think in our next little discussion here, I'll explain why that protection may have been important or not important, and why things may have changed as to why the deal got done. Then you have Philip Hedl, who seems like a fine middle six forward, fairly young, but I think the knock on him is he's one concussion away from never playing hockey again, or there are many creative ways people choose to say that. And then Victor Mancini, young defenseman, kind of on that AHL, NHL threshold. You know, those guys who are just kind of in between that threshold, who seems to be promising right now. So hopefully he could go at some point in the future, play in the top 4 for us. But right now seems more like a 7th defenseman, maybe an AHL call-up.
Yeah, and he's the kind of guy that I think long term for you guys will slot in as a 4-5-6 somewhere, in there. Like he'll be on your middle pairing or on your bottom pairing, and he's got some tools, but we'll see. I mean, his stock is on the rise too, so is one of the prospects that would have been included in this trade 6 months ago to a year ago. Probably not, but he's been progressing well enough that he's been in trade talks, and now he's a Vancouver Canuck, and he might be getting his shot sooner rather than later. We'll see. Quinn Hughes, I see, is day to day. So if he doesn't go, maybe it is Mancini, maybe it's Juleson, maybe it is Pettersson. You just play 2 of them. But we mentioned all season that the D-core needed an upgrade, and you went ahead and flipped that first for an upgrade to the D-core that helps this season, right? So we're talking about Mancini for the future. But, we've been saying, like, hey, you need defenders. And Philip Hedl's fine. He's a middle 6 center. He'll go to the gritty areas. He'll score some goals. Maybe not the best defensive impact, but he's a middle 6 player that with some offensive pop and in some, willingness to go to those areas that you need to go. And I think maybe we'll get the best out of him here in Vancouver because he might fit Tocchet's system really well. And what Tocchet did he coach Hedl, right? He was part of the Rangers, right? Tocchet coached the
Maybe as an
Rangers.
assistant. I know his last job was with Arizona as the head coach.
Either way, he might be a guy that he's known about just from being around there or scouting or whatever, and likes him a lot because really on paper this is an incredibly underwhelming trade for somebody like JT Miller, right? Yeah. You look at what JT Miller's been doing on the ice in the past, not this season because nobody on the Canucks but Quinn Hughes is doing well analytically. And you would expect more for, like, we're talking JT Miller fetched you Hedel, a rising 5'6" or 4'5'6" defenseman, and a protected first versus Pettersson. We're talking about Dylan Cousins, Bowen Byram, and something else, right? Like, so clearly the more valuable asset is Elias Pettersson. I'm just surprised to see JT Miller go for so little. But if you then talk about the next trade, Abby, it doesn't look as bad because you did then flip that first, as well as Danton Heinen and Vinny Desharnais and Melvin Fernstrom. Heinen and Desharnais weren't really you're not hurting too bad about losing those guys. And you flip them for Marcus Pettersson and Drew O'Connor. And I think Marcus Pettersson is exactly what we've been saying you guys need to go after, right? You needed that guy for the second pairing who can, hold his own and is not awful.
We've been talking about him quite a bit, actually, over the last few podcasts, I believe.
Yeah, so absolutely perfect, right? We look at the top four now, and especially with the way Myers has been playing, Hughes and Hronik, I know that's not the current pairing, but that's the pairing I want. And then Pettersson and Myers, that's a lot better than what you had previously, where you had Soucy and Myers on that middle pairing, and now Hronik's back, right? So this could be the perfect time for you guys to go ahead and make that push to make the postseason, and then we'll see what happens. I still look at this team, and I don't see the forward depth like it was before, right? When you had two top centers, you can get away with maybe a little bit less on the blue line, or your wingers maybe being a bit questionable at times, but now you've loaded up line number one, very similar to what the Sabres are doing, and you got to hope that Dakota Joshua, Pius Suter, and Garland, I mean, I know Garland's always had good impacts as a middle sixer, but you're hoping that your middle six, rather than a 2, which is more like a 1B, becomes a 3A, 3B kind of thing, where they're both like, you take your pick, whichever line is rolling, you give that line second line ice time for the night.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. So just one quick correction. Tocchet did not coach the Rangers at any point. He was a head coach for the Lightning first, then Arizona, and then Vancouver, and did some assistant work, but was never with the Rangers. Yeah, as far as the flip goes, and you look at their lines, we've been saying all year, you're right, they need defensemen, and Marcus Pettersson is a competent defenseman. Maybe Trey Mancini will come in and be a good defenseman in that bottom pairing compared to what we have, right? But ultimately, these para trades kind of balance out the lineup. We get Drew O'Connor, Philip Hedel for that forward core and kind of to like just fill in some holes, and you have Marcus Pettersson to really, really fill in that middle pairing and provide some stability there and some consistency where, again, you have to decide now. You can actually maybe play, as you said, Hughes and Hronik together if you really want to without being like, okay, well, we have to put a freaking number 5, number 6 defenseman on the middle pairing and we're going to get killed, right? Now you have some flexibility. You could even see Marcus Pettersson maybe up on that top pairing at some point. It just gives you options, which is great. And I think the Canucks I think it was said today, Alvin wants to aggressively pursue extending Marcus Pettersson. It should be said both Marcus Pettersson and Drew O'Connor are on expiring deals. So it'll be curious to see whether these are rentals. And then in Pettersson's case, I don't think it will be for sure. And we'll see in O'Connor's case whether they're rentals or whether they are long-term pieces who join the team. And that makes a Pettersson deal more interesting as well, right? If you were going to go to Buffalo and say get to Owen Power and Dylan Cousins, does Power still fit in? Are you then rocking a top 4 of Hughes, Power, Hronik, and Marcus Pettersson, or is that a little too offense heavy? It changes the dynamic of this season itself to see. You're going into a team that has a stronger defense now and a bit less firepower offensively. What kind of impact that has, as well as kind of the long-term future. What do you do with other pieces? Like, do you re-sign Besser? Do you extend Lankinen? And what do you do with Elias Pettersson?
And I think, looking at the talk about the contracts and rentals, the cap is exploding over the
Yeah,
next 3
my
years, right?
God.
So we were talking about like, oh, can Vancouver keep everybody? After these deals are done, after the projections, you guys are estimated to have 25.9, we'll round up, $26 million in cap space to sign Brock Besser, Pius Suter, Drew O'Connor, Marcus Pettersson, and Kevin Lankinen as the most notable to me. So I think the deal can absolutely get done. We'll see. Obviously, people are going to ask for more money than anticipated, right? Because they're going to ask for a percentage of the cap rather than, oh, I'm a $5.5 million defenseman. Like, no, I'm a 6% of the cap defenseman. So you're gonna definitely have to adjust the way we look at contracts. But I think you guys do have some flexibility. Drew O'Connor's not going to probably be too expensive. It's Brock Besser and Pettersson, and then surprisingly Lankinen, right? I know you and I had a conversation, and we don't see eye to eye on extending Lankinen, but with the cap at what it is, if you can keep all three, I would. I think if I had to pick two, I'm picking Besser and Pettersson.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think where I stand with Lankinen is he's played beyond what anyone could have expected this year. He played spectacular and really has given us a chance to make the playoffs, quite frankly. And Demko's had a little bit of injury iffiness. Now, if we hope for the best and Demko is healthy for the next, however many years, lovely. But I think signing Lankinen into a 3 to 4 year extension could be a really good insurance policy in place where if Demko goes down, it's okay. Kevin Lankinen is here to save the day. And we've seen he can do it over a decent amount of time, over a decent stretch. Yeah, I think I think I'd agree with you. If we're picking two of the three, I would still pick Besser and Pettersson. But I think re-signing Kevin Lankinen is also a very, very important thing in terms of the structure and stability of this team, because clearly they're also comfortable playing in front of Lankinen, which I think is another important thing. Regardless of how good your actual goalie is, if your team is comfortable playing in front of said goalie, it's going to make a big difference. And one other thing I wanted to cover about the Pittsburgh trade, and I think some people have pointed this out, where if you look at just kind of what's going in, what's going out, right, and you don't really think about the greater context, right? You see, okay, you're trading away a first round pick, a bottom six forward, a bottom six defenseman, and a meh prospect for a top four defenseman and a bottom six player. Sounds like a bit much. But what you have to keep in mind, and what I think people are realizing, is Denton Heinen and Vinny Desharnais were both probably negative assets, and likely were the reason it took a first-round pick to go and get an expiring Marcus Pettersson and Drew O'Connor.
Yeah, the cap implications are massive here, right? Because, I mean, Pittsburgh has Crosby. They probably aren't ready to completely tear it down to the studs. I mean, they have Crosby, Malkin, Carlson, Letang, right? Like, they have all those guys, but they're not ready to tear it down, like a team that's like, okay, we're past our expiry date, and these two teams will forever be linked, but I'm sure Pittsburgh is looking at Washington and being like, why can't we be them? Like, we could, as long as we make the right moves and kind of go under the radar with some sneaky buys, right? I mean, they didn't necessarily go under the radar. They signed some of the bigger free agents, but they were tactical. Washington was. And Pittsburgh's probably looking at like, hey, we can do that too. But they also got to get ready for life after Crosby. So we'll see if they do draft with that first round pick, because this draft class is one that's not really top heavy whatsoever, but it's one that has a lot of, in that middle, there's a lot of solid prospects. I think it's like 20 through 50 are like interchangeable or something like that. Yeah, maybe not exactly interchangeable, but there's a lot of talent in this in the depth of this draft class. Yeah. So not a good year to be a bad team and tank and tear it down, because there's like 5 players that are in the conversation for first overall, and I know we're starting to narrow it down to just a couple players. I believe there's that kid that plays for the Erie Otters, the left-handed defenseman. Schaefer, yeah. Knowing our luck, the Sabres are going to win the lottery, and there's going to be a number 1 left-handed defenseman at the top of the board for them. So they would probably...
You wouldn't be familiar with those, would you?
No, we've never done that before. But again, we'll see what happens with Pittsburgh. But for Vancouver, I think it was really... You had to trade a premium asset to get a bunch of depth and to plug the holes, right? It's gonna be more of a sum of the parts thing, because the star power was not working. You guys aren't in the playoffs, so Obviously we're going to try and see if these some of the parts, the guys like Hedel and O'Connor, Hedel for the middle six, O'Connor for the bottom six, Pettersson for the blue line, right? Does that free up some more ability to play faster and to get guys like Nils Hoglander back to where he was scoring and to really get Pettersson back to his even a point per game pace, like 90-point pace, that get there, right? We'll see if this kind of roster construction allows the flexibility for them to do that, and Lankinen and Demko and getting they're rolling fine. Well, maybe not Demko. Demko's still coming back, but the rest of the roster hopefully can get rolling now, rather than, okay, we got to play a little bit more plotting because we don't necessarily have the depth to, if the top guys get tired, we don't really have anybody else, right? If Quinn Hughes needs a shift off, I didn't trust anybody out there. You just pray.
Yeah, Quinn Hughes is one of the best cases for the Hart ever. You look at all the analytics with him on versus off the ice. Off the ice, when he's off the ice, the Canucks are not much better than the San Jose Sharks. Quinn Hughes is the Canucks. You could very much call this the Vancouver Hugheses sometimes, and hopefully that means we're getting other Hugheses. But it's scary how much Quinn Hughes carries this team on his back, and I hope it doesn't break anytime soon. The other thing I think worth mentioning here with the changes the Canucks have made is they're not necessarily done. Alvin, I don't know if it was Alvin or Rutherford, mentioned wanting one more top six forward. And I think that makes a lot of sense. When you look at someone like Hedel, he's not necessarily someone you'd love as your second line center. He's serviceable, but he's someone maybe you either want to flip to the wing or use as your third line center. And I think that's where pursuing someone in that middle six, especially that second line, is a good idea. And I think this is a trade I've floated around a couple times, but the Canucks should look into the price of Philip Kurashev and Connor Murphy from the Blackhawks. Again, Murphy's a very, very good shutdown number 4 defenseman. And again, when you're going to the playoffs, you want some level of depth. And right now I know they have some good depth, but he's also someone we've seen Quinn Hughes play very, very well alongside Luke Shen and Chris Tanev, who are both two kind of very, very defensively focused defensemen. So I wonder if someone like Connor Murphy playing upside there and then allowing you to slide, even though he's playing really well right now. I don't know how long we can depend on Tyler Myers playing in this form. Sliding Tyler Myers down to that bottom pairing. Seeing what kind of impact that has on the team's defensive stability. And again, really, really making the defense from the weakness to the strength of this team. And then Philip Kurashev, who I think has just been always a solid point producer for Chicago, seeing how he can do in the top 6 with Vancouver. Maybe he even plays in the first line with Pettersson and you move some of that depth down to DeBrusk or Besser down to that second line. I think that's a good kind of final move for the year if you're really pushing for the playoffs.
And just looking at the trade board that Chris Johnston has posted, JT Miller was the number 1 player, but then you got guys like Brock Nelson, Ryan O'Reilly, maybe a bit too expensive for what the Canucks are willing to pay. But you look at a guy like Yanni Gord, I think could be a decent wing addition, right? If you're keeping Hedel at center. There's also guys like Brandon Tanev out there, who's not been really good, but maybe a change of scenery helps him out. Jake Evans from Montreal is a name that's been floating around out there. Kyle Palmieri, another decent offensive option, veteran, right? So we'll see what happens and what teams go with here, but there's just some options, some names out there. You don't have to love them, but we'll see who Alvin and Rutherford love as well.
Yeah.
And you guys are on the cusp of the playoffs, so you guys can still make moves. We've got the break coming for the Four Nations tournament, maybe some self-scouting to see how the roster does in the couple games, see really where you need some help, or maybe not, and then you go from there.
Yeah. Oh, I will also like to correct myself. Philip Kurashev is having an absolutely god-awful year. 8 points in 36 games. So let me go ahead and take that back really quick. He was coming off a 54-point campaign last year. And I'd have to look more into the analytics of it all. I'm sure you can do that on another episode, Ryan. But 4 goals and 4 points right now. He's a RFA at the end of this year. And the way he's playing, I don't know that he'll be qualified. My goodness.
Yeah, I guess that's that then for the Canucks, right? Shall we talk about the Sabres? And they've actually not been bad lately. They've been doing all right. They got a win today against the Devils, and I'll touch more on that one in a bit. But obviously, you know, I want to win all the games. Like anybody that's upset because we're ruining our draft position, like, come on, guys. Like, we don't need that anymore. We are now down to the 11th best pipeline in the league. The Athletics been going through, and I think like once a day or something like that, they're updating a new one. And the Sabres just recently came out, and they're 11th, down from first in the NHL. And I think I agree with it, just simply because there's no stars coming through the pipeline. We don't have bona fide first line wingers coming up, or top pairing defensemen coming up, or an elite goaltender coming up even. But we do have a bunch of solid guys for the middle six, bottom nine, if you will. Right, well, just one of those guys that can slot anywhere. I'm thinking about some of our other prospects. Like, you look at a guy like Zach Benson. He's been playing all up and down the lineup, and he's been so good. I just need to see him start scoring. But the Sabres player that I really wanted to touch on, and we talked to him, I talked about him at the season preview, was Yuri Kulik. He has arrived. I mean, he's just been absolutely phenomenal. In his last 5 games, he's got 4 goals and 3 assists. Oh, that doesn't include today's game. I don't have the stats pulled up for today's game, but going into today, he had 4 goals and 3 assists in 5 games. And he's really centered that first line so well. That line with Tage, Peterka, and Kulik has been really, really good. Now, their XG could be better, and they was good today, so it's probably going to boost this number up, but it was 48.5% XG for in the 70 minutes they've played so far, but they've got a positive Corsi for at 51%, and they're outscoring their opponents, and these numbers do include today's game, 13-6 when they're out there on the ice. And I mean, that's a pretty good a number. I'll take that any day. And Yuri Kulik's shot, I mean, the kid's just developing. Like, he's a rookie. He's in there, and he's centering the top line, and it's allowing Tage Thompson to go to the wing, which really does increase the urgency that I was hoping for Buffalo to get a deal done with Pettersson. Now, it does take 2 to tango, but if Tage is now going to be your top line winger, the Sabres don't have any centers worth a damn. I mean, Yuri Kulik is the center on that top line right now, and he's been really, really good, but I don't want to ask this, 20-year-old kid, he's going to be 21 by the time next season comes around, 21-year-old to be our number 1 center. That's how we're in this mess in the first place. We need to find an answer at center if it's not Tage Thompson, and it's not going to be Dylan Cousins. Dylan Cousins he's fine. He's a middle 6 center who's offensive, and he's got a little bit of physicality to his game. Don't let that trick you. Just because the dude's tall and he's physical doesn't mean he's defensive, guys. Like, let's get that one through our heads. He's an offensive-minded center, and he gets about half a point per game. The only season he didn't, he shot like 14%. So, you know, he's been shooting 8%, 9%, and 8.4%. The other 3 seasons, his breakout year, he shot 14.7%. I think we're seeing that Dylan Cousins is probably a below-average shooter, and is a 40 to 50 point center, which is not very good, and certainly isn't on the right trajectory for a number 1 guy. So I don't know. I'm at a loss of what the Sabres need to do, and that's why the Pettersson deal, I was so hopeful it was going to happen, because there it is. There's your number 1 center, allows Yuri Kulik to be on the second line and Dylan Cousins on the third line, or you move one of those guys to wing and you put somebody, whatever. You can shuffle lines, but you've got options. Center options of Pettersson, Tage, Kulik, Cousins, and McLeod. Like, that's, you could make something out of that. Yeah. So, I mean, well, Cousins wouldn't be on the team in this scenario, but it would probably be Pettersson, Kulik, McLeod down the middle as your 3. And I think that's perfectly fine. I think that would be a phenomenal one. So I am hoping that Pettersson gets moved, and I know you Canucks fans listening to this probably don't like me talking about your players like I want them, and you don't want anybody that we're going to offer.
You stay away, you Buffalo Sabre.
I know. But honestly, that line has been really, really good, and they're carrying games. Like, Tage Thompson has like 21, 22 points in his last 18 games. It's like he's like that. Yeah. They've been dominating. The Peterka and Tage had dueling hat tricks in our 7-2 win over the Boston Bruins, who their GM said playoff hockey starts tonight. So yeah, and they got throttled by the Sabres, and the Sabres come out and jump all over the Devils today, 3-0 after one. Now the game finished 4-3, and the Sabres, I think this is now a coaching thing. I'm willing to say it's a coaching thing, but for the team to be so good in the first period, which was a major issue they had last year, and then all of a sudden they just can't close out games. I think they just look like they're playing on their heels. They look like they are just not really taking advantage of the fact that they're leading and the other team is desperate to come back. The Sabres are 15-12-5 when they score first.
Whoa, that is above Bettman 500, but
right, and that's why they are where they are, right? Like the team, I believe. Oh God, let me pull this up really quickly, but they're top 10, I believe, in even strength goals for per game, which is awesome. They currently rank 6th in the NHL in even strength goals for per game.
That's crazy.
So the offense is there, and they're scoring, and they're getting out to early leads. They just aren't holding on to the lead when they have it, and when they don't have the lead, they don't battle back very well. They're 5-14 when the opponent scores first. So couple you blow a lot of leads with you don't come back very often means you're at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. I don't think they deserve to be. This team needs to find a way to put it all together. And I think it's a little bit of roster thing. I think some shakeup is necessary. I don't know if, obviously, Lindy's not the future. He signed through next season, and that's it. And I don't know if he's going to make it to next season. We'll see. But I think that something needs to happen here because we can't just keep going year after year and running it back with the core. So I think they're going to make a move. I just hope it's the right one. And I'm not sure if Kevin Adams is the guy to do it because he has not been able to get any of the deals that he's talked about across the line.
Yeah, and I think, you say the Sabres are at the bottom of the East and they don't deserve it. Well, you look at all the teams right now, and almost no team, if you look at regulation losses versus regulation wins, no one has. I think the Sabres are the only team in the East with 5 more losses than wins. They're not playing awful hockey right now. It's just a lot of these teams at the bottom, right? Like right now, you can see the Red Wings are on a bit of a crazy streak. They're on a 5-game winning streak. The Habs are on a 4-game losing streak now, but they were on a good winning streak there in the beginning. The Pens, the Flyers, all these teams at the bottom have been hot at some point. So I think that may also be exacerbating Buffalo's issues. I feel like if they were in the West, then perhaps they would, let's see there, I don't think they would be the bottom.
No, the Predators, Blackhawks, and Sharks are beneath them, and they'd be 1 point behind the Ducks.
You look at all those too as well, right? You see Predators, they have 8 more losses than wins in terms of regulation. The Blackhawks have 15 more losses than wins. The Sharks have 18 more losses than wins, right? These are some significant differences between that, and you're just not seeing that in the East right now. It seems like the bottom of the East is still staying very, very tight and competitive, not necessarily for the playoff race, but at least with each other. And I think that maybe is why we see the Sabres, who have a lot more talents than bottom of the East caliber, in that position right now. It's not even necessarily the Sabres. It might just be the competition around them.
And that to me, that's why I'm like, something has to give, right? Because this team is more talented on paper than bottom of the East, 11 points out, yada, yada, yada. Like, they're better than that on paper, but I think something just has to give. You need to bring in guys that know how to win, and, Zucker and Greenway are extension candidates. And I know a lot of Sabres fans are like, oh, great, like the Sabres want to extend Zucker and want to extend Greenway. Just run it back with the same core. And it's like, well, those are the guys that you need. You need more Zuckers. You need more Greenways. You need to go out and get some of these guys that have been there, that have done it, those veterans, right? Because your top end talent is there. You've got your Tucks, you've got your Paterkas, you've got your Tages, you've got your Kuliks. We'll see what happens with Cousins, but he's at least a 40, 50 point guy. So while it feels like he's disappointing, if we just recalibrate our expectations to be 20 goals, 40, 50 points, if he does that every year in the middle 6, nobody's really going to complain. It's just the fact that we were so excited that he was on such a hot trajectory, and we thought he broke out in year 3 before he regressed multiple years in a row. So I wouldn't be opposed to getting rid of Cousins, especially if a team like we'll just keep using this trade, right? Because I don't have one in mind. But like the Pettersson trade, right? If the Canucks were going to bite on moving Pettersson for Cousins and Byram and something else, we know that Pettersson's floor is what Dylan Cousins is telling us he is. Now, maybe Dylan Cousins gets a little bit better in a new system, less pressure, new like reset, closer to home. But like Pettersson is a 50-point guy in his sleep. Like Pettersson's awful years are 50 points. So far, that's like Dylan Cousins' best season is 50 points. So, Vancouver fans, if it does go through this summer, I'm sorry, but you just got to deal with it, because I don't think Dylan Cousins is the guy he's shown us at tournaments. Like he goes to tournaments, he scores a goal per game in 7 games for Team Canada, and he comes back to Buffalo and he shoots 8%. Like, make it make sense, Abby. Make it make sense.
Some guys just play that much better when they've got the real logo they want on their chest. You know, they want that Team Canada logo, and they can play that much better. But no, when you were describing Cousins, it reminded me a little bit of Pierre-Luc Dubois. And I look at his stats now, and it's not necessarily a perfect comparison, but you kind of look at, you know, his first couple of years coming up through Columbus. He had a little bit of a regression, just a slight regression in his third year when he was moved to Winnipeg. Had a okay couple of seasons, and then kind of his next season with the Kings, he had a horrible regression. But now you've seen him with the Capitals in a different environment, and he's bouncing back. And I wonder if that's kind of more similar to how Cousins could be as well, where maybe it's the change of scenery, maybe it's just finding the right fit, the right line mates, right? Dubois is playing with some pretty good line mates in Washington. If the Canucks could surround him with some good middle six wingers, maybe that makes the world of difference. But I'd be curious to see that. And again, if we even know if this is even possible, if Pettersson goes out and, you know, like let's see what he's at right now. I think Pettersson is at 30 some odd points.
He's at 33 points in 45 games. He's got 11 goals.
Sure. So let's say he ends the season with 25 goals and 80 points. I think it's going to be a lot more quiet on the let's trade Pettersson talk. And maybe, you know, looking at this administration, maybe they're smart and they decide let's trade high on Pettersson right before this major cap hit comes in. Or on the other side of thinking, this cap hit isn't so major anymore under a $95 million cap. So it'd be very curious to see. Again, it all comes down to Pettersson. If Pettersson doesn't perform, I think it's very likely we see him shipped out at the draft or even before it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's like I said, that's that as big of a prove it moment as it can be for a guy who's got an 8-year deal with a no trade clause or no move clause coming up. So, you know, the Sabres, they got a lot of soul searching to do, right? You look at this roster and on paper, it's not as bad, but you're also not like looking at this team on paper and you're saying this team can win a playoff round or even 2, right? You're looking at this team and you're like, sure, they can make the playoffs. They're going to get absolutely trounced while they're there, but they could make the playoffs. You know, I don't like, imagine Buffalo made the playoffs this year and they go up against Washington in a 7-game series. I don't know if Buffalo scores a goal.
Yeah. And I think another way to think about it, right, is if, let's say you bought a ticket to a game for your local hockey team that's in the NHL, assuming you have one. There's different teams where if you go and you see the Avalanche and you see fucking McKinnon and Makar and now Natchez and these guys, right? And you're like, oh my goodness, you know? Or you go and you see the Hurricanes with Rantanen and Aho and these guys, and you're just scared, right? Oilers, obviously, with McDavid and Draisaitl and Bouchard. You see the lineups and you feel the fear like, oh gosh, this could be a long night. As nice and balanced as the Sabres, you know, depth is, I wouldn't, you know, if I'm going to a Canucks game and I see that lineup against me, I'm like, oh, okay, we got a good shot to win tonight. There's no fear. You have to have, you know, if I'm on another team and I see I'm playing the Canucks, I look at Quinn Hughes, I get scared about what Quinn Hughes is going to do to me. You know, I'm playing against Pittsburgh, I'm scared what Crosby is going to do to me. Tage Thompson's a great player, Rasmus Dahlin's a great player. Nobody is scared looking at that Sabres lineup, and that's something that has to change, whether it's you have some great physicality in the bottom 6, whether it's, you know, you have stud puck moving defensemen, and again, they have some good defensemen, but whether you make that your identity and build your team around that, or whether you have that one single superstar like Tage did that one year that Tage had. He was the unicorn. It was scary to play against Tage Thompson, and that's just not the case right now.
And you know what? I agree with you. It's not right now, but the most encouraging part of this season for me and the thing that gives me the most like ability to exhale as a Sabres fan is Tage is showing he's more like that season than he was last year. And last year he was injured and everything like that. But, that breakout season you're talking about, he scored 0.6 goals per game. This season he's at 0.54. Points have obviously dropped off. He was at 1.21 per game then. This season he's at 0.98. But now you can see that he's found his groove and his rhythm, and he's got line mates who aren't completely dead weight anymore with Kulich and Peterka. And we're also seeing Peterka establish himself as like, okay, last season was not a fluke. He is good, right? And Dahlin is just that good, right? Dahlin's having a good season as well. So you look at the team now and you say you're not afraid of it, but perceptions can change when the team is rolling. And the thing in hockey too is like the secondary assist, the Cal Makar assist, is is so good for just like looking at the stat sheet because if your line mates are going, you're probably gonna get a couple points that you don't really deserve or that you didn't make the play, right? Like the defenseman breaks it out to a winger, and the winger makes an awesome move to get by two guys and then feeds it backdoor. I mean, sure, the defenseman broke the puck out of the zone, but he didn't do as much as the winger that got the primary assist. So, I think that as the team gets better, a rising tide lifts all ships. Like Rasmus Dahlin has 37 points in 43 games and is a +2 on this team, right? So like Dahlin, Tage, Peterka, even Power. I mean, Power I think has some of the best even strength stats. We talked about Hoglander last year. I believe Owen Power's right there with like Cale Makar for even strength goals or points or something. So these guys are getting there, but the rest of the team around them aren't good. Jack Quinn, I don't know what he's doing half the time he's out there. I don't think Jack Quinn knows what he's doing. I've never seen a player just float so hard. He has zero impact on the game that is positive for the Sabres. And you see him get the puck every once in a while, but he's not an active participant. And I feel like he just kind of, I don't want to say he coasts because that would mean like that might be an effort thing, right? He's not giving effort because he's skating. He's just never in a spot to be a difference maker, to make a play. And sure, he's got that shot that he can unleash every once in a while. And for 3 games, he might score 4 goals because he's just got a wicked shot. But other than that, the dude is just, I don't know. I can't call him a liability because he's not doing anything negative. I just like, what are you doing here? What is your purpose? Like, he's not going to make more than $2 million next year. And that might be an overpay. And then, oh my goodness, Mattias Samuelsson, get him out of here. And this is what I wanted to get to, by the way, when I mentioned the Devils game. Mattias Samuelsson has an A. He's got an A, right? And Nason, or whatever, however you say his name, was just pushing the boundary all game, doing a little dirty things, but it's not completely over the line. He just goes straight through the head of Tage Thompson, gets a match penalty, gets kicked out. The entire Sabres team just kind of sat there. And we're like, what happened? Like, why is Tage on the ground? Oh, and by the way, 6'4", 225, Mattias Samuelsson with the A was on the ice. So you could say, oh, but we had Benson out there and Power and, these guys that aren't really known for that. Like, Mattias Samuelsson's one job is to eat pucks and play physical. He cannot move the puck worth a damn. He fires it to the other team when they're on the forecheck. That one I showed you that clip against Edmonton. Yeah. Like, that is the Mattias Samuelsson experience. By the way, he's in year 2 of a 7-year, $4.3 million contract.
Ouch.
He's a leader. This is one of the leaders in the locker room, too. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like what? He's supposed to be a physical shutdown guy, so you give him the A? No, miss me with that. Okay, Sabres fans, I know we've talked about this a lot, so Sabres fans know this. But to buy out Mattias Samuelsson this year would only cost the Sabres $700,000 over 10 years. And with the cap going up as much as it is to $95 million, it's going to be over $100 million in just a couple seasons. Like, dude, like we're talking less than 1% of the cap if you buy out Mattias Samuelsson. And listen, if he finds if you could trade him, do it. But I don't think anybody's going to acquire him. So listen, I don't really root against the people. It's the player that I can't stand with Mattias Samuelsson. He cannot string a pass together. And I've been saying this now every year we've done this podcast, and even before then. Like, I'm like, oh, if he's been a decent shutdown guy. He blocks shots. He plays physical. If he can just work on moving the puck a little bit better than he has, he's going to be a perfect for this contract. He hasn't shown any signs of progression. He doesn't really look like he knows what's going on out there. And if you're supposed to be a physical tone setter, like, Mr. Tough Guy, big boy Matthias Samuelsson, when Tage Thompson gets run over, if you see Tage with his helmet off, head in his hands, face down on the ice, I don't know, you go find somebody. I don't care if it's the guy. You grab somebody. But you know what? The only person to touch a Devils player was the linesman.
Oh.
It was my cousin-in-law, but it was a linesman.
Wow, what are the chances, eh?
Yeah, I know, right? But like, it was just, you can't have that. Like, obviously he's rushing over because somebody's gonna jump him. Crickets, bro. Like, so I think these are the kind of moves that you don't want to make this, right? You want Matthias Samuelsson to develop into, like, make smarter decisions and be that tough guy you need him to be. He's only 24, right? That's young for a defenseman. And you don't want Jack Quinn and Dylan Cousins to be just jettisoned to the sun. But at some point, you got to show some kind of pulse in the front office. You did great getting Jason Zucker. Jordan Greenway is an impact player when he's out there. We'll see if he comes back. I think Beck Malenstein has been great for the fourth line. Sam Lafferty, I'm sorry, but your time is up. So there's another guy who I think is on his way out of town. And there's pieces, there's things, but this team needs to get older and more experienced and be really what they've told us they're trying to be all along, and that's harder to play against, right? You just look at the core of this team. And Tage is 27, by the way. We don't have 3 years to get to a relevant stage. We kind of need to hurry up because Tuck's 28, Tage is 27. You need to get a move on here. We need to make some tough pills to swallow for sure. And you may look like an idiot, but at least you went out swinging. You traded Cousins and Byram, and you went out and got Pettersson or some equivalent player, right? And you bought out Matthias Samuelsson to save yourself the $3.5 million on the cap, so you could go out and give another Jason Zucker type player a $5-6 million deal to help the roster. You just need to do something and really just change the culture of this team. And that's another thing too. We need to keep winning. I don't care about the draft pick. Win. Yeah. Show me you know how to win. Figure it out so that maybe year 2 of Lindy Ruff, if he makes it back, right? This is an audition for everybody. This is an audition for everybody. And I can tell you who's passed the test. It's Tage, it's Kulik, it's Peterka, it's Tuck, it's Benson, Zucker, it's Dahlin, it's Power. That's really it. Even Dennis Gilbert looks pretty good.
Yep, and I think, listening to that personnel you listed, right, with the 1 or 2 more additions, I think you really can develop an identity. And I think what I'd call that identity is a sniper's paradise. You've got Kulik, you've got Thompson, you've got Tuck, you've got Peterka, you've got, if Jack Quinn can get his shit together, right? These are all people with lethal shots, or if not a lethal shot, at least some other way to be able to score goals very, very effectively. And they have, outside of Jack Quinn, have a track record of it. You get 1 or 2 or more guys like that, and you can put 2 on a line on your top 3 lines, and you have a sniper's paradise where every single time a line is out there, you're scared you're going to get scored on. And there's still places for people like Pettersson, who has had 30 goals before. There's places for people you already have, like, Ryan McLeod. With his speed, he can facilitate said snipers on the third line.
I was going to add him in. Sorry. I completely glossed over McLeod because he doesn't really put up points. He had a nice breakaway goal shorthanded today. Him and Tuck penalty kill. McLeod has been perfect. I know Savoy is doing well in the AHL, but McLeod is exactly what this team needed, looking at the, a third line center who's a defensively minded guy, and he is incredibly fast. He's a great skater. So, continue, but I wanted to give him his flowers too, because I know he may not pop up with a highlight reel goals and shots like Peterka and Kulik and those guys have, but he deserves some credit too.
Exactly. Point being, you have the personnel to facilitate this. It's just about getting those 1 or 2 more pieces and creating that mindset of set up the snipers. Let these guys who can score, who have the shot, and giving them the opportunities to shoot. So again, someone like McLeod, perfect on the third line with his speed to facilitate that. Someone like Pettersson can both participate and facilitate. Tage Thompson participate and facilitate, right? You have these pieces to be able to do that. You just have to be able to decide this is our identity and coach around that identity and build your culture around that identity and build your practices around that identity. Like you said, and again, I feel like we say this all the time, and it's not just a hockey thing, right? You look at the Detroit Lions, right? They built an identity. You know, it's that speech, right? People clowned on Dan Campbell's speech, like, "Oh, we're gonna like bite your kneecap off, and then we're gonna bring you back down. You have to punch us again. We're gonna bite your other kneecap off." But it's worked great for them because people bought in. So once you develop an identity and you can get your core players to buy in, that's where change will happen, and that's where, again, right, like you look at the Sabres of old, even when they weren't necessarily, making it deep into the playoffs, they were built around Ryan Miller, right? You had your identity, and that's what they need to build now.
Oh, and speaking of Ryan Miller, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, we have a goalie. It's not like he's taken a step back from his lofty heights of the second half of last season, but he's still been a quality goaltender, and I think they'd actually be in a worse position without Luukkonen. That's hard to say that, but like some of these games, like today they closed out, he made some phenomenal saves. So I think the pieces are there. You just need to, like, you've scored first. What did I say? They were 15, 12, and 5.
Yeah,
they've scored first 32 wow. times this season. 32 out of 52. It's almost 60% of the games they've scored first. They should be winning over 50%. They should be winning, and I mean, technically they are, like, bet me 500, but, like, you know what I'm saying? They should be winning 50% of those games, not just getting 50% of the points. And, you look at like the guys, this is this offseason. This is a chance with the cap going up. You have a chance to make a difference, Kevin Adams, if it is still you, if Terry Pegula doesn't do anything, which I don't think he will. I think Kevin Adams will be the GM again. But you look at the guy expiring contracts, Jason Zucker. Is he going to take a slight discount, or is he going to get $5 million again? Jordan Greenway, has he done anything to earn a pay raise, or is he going to be another $3 million guy? Ryan McLeod is an RFA. He's probably not done enough to get a huge pay raise. Jack Quinn is an RFA. JJ Peterka is an RFA. And then Tyson Kozak, who's been called up and has been a pretty solid, feisty fourth liner. He's made some young mistakes, but he is 22. I don't expect him to be a very big cap number. But then you got Bowen Byram. Are you re-signing Bowen Byram, and then you're going to pay Dahlin, Power, and Byram probably like $27 million, $25+ million as a pair, as a unit? Do you then maybe buy out Matthias Samuelsson? So you save $3.5 million on Samuelsson to give that to Bowen Byram.
Buy him out regardless. With the math, buy him out. Again, hit the button. Hit that big buyout button. I don't care what the situation of the team is. I don't care if you trade away every other defenseman on the team and he's your only defenseman left. You buy him out.
Right, the Samuelsson and Byram are combining for a cap hit of about $8 million right now. If you give Bowen Byram $7.5 million, and you buy out Samuelsson, you're really not increasing your cap number. Now you are decreasing the amount of defenders you have, so you've got to go find somebody else. But personally, I'm in the camp of trade Bo Byram. I know Kevin Adams has said he wants to re-sign him. Maybe that's a negotiation tactic, but if you look at Bo Byram's numbers when he's not playing with Dahlin or Power, oh boy, oh my goodness, you guys would absolutely have to pair him with Quinn Hughes or Hronik or something if you did acquire him. So, look out. But I mean, he's had some flashes, and the Sabres are at their best when the defense is active, right? When the defense, like, we're seeing 4 people jumping into the rush, and those defensemen are getting in there. And the amount of times I've seen Zucker and like Peterka at the point because Byram and Dahlin are down low is just kind of funny to me. But like, that is, lean into the identity, do it, like, absolutely. Because that's where the talent is. That's where the talent of this team lies. But I think you move on from Bowen Byram to get one of those guys that's going to make the middle six better. And it's not, not anybody on the trade block right now because those are all veterans. But Henry Yoki-Haru is a UFA after this year. Adios, Yoki. Jacob Bryson is a UFA after this year. Adios. If he wants more than $1 million, goodbye. And then Dennis Gilbert, perfect 6'7" defenseman. Connor Clifton was scratched today, so we'll see what they do with his $3 million cap hit next year. But like, there's some opportunity to sign some guys, buy some guys out, and trade some guys that we haven't had and we have the most clarity of who's who on the team that we've had in a while. So, Levi is dominating the AHL, but he's not been good in the NHL. So maybe he's on that Dustin Wolf path where he becomes one of the best goalies in the AHL for another year, and you just kind of bring another goalie in. But, Skinner's cap hit, Skinner, the buyout is going to go up. It goes to 4.4 next year. It was 1.4 this year, and then 6.4 in 2 years. So something to think about. But the cap number going up so much, like, we have 33.7 million in cap space. I think you can absolutely bring back McLeod, Greenway, Zucker, Quinn, Peterka easily, as well as adding in some extra cap hits to that, right? So we'll see what happens. But man, oh man, something has to give, because I can't keep. That's why these episodes are getting so infrequent, and I apologize to our Vancouver fans because the stuff is happening for you guys, but nothing's happening here. Like, there's nothing going on. We just continue to spin our tires. We get a lead, we blow a lead. We don't have a lead, we lose the game. We somehow hold on every once in a while. We score 7 and then we can't score. Like, it's
all over the place.
It's exhausting. It really is.
You know what? I think the Vancouver fans are getting a little taste of that as well, where we had some majorly inconsistent things, but it's just, I can't even imagine what it's like to be like, you're one of my best friends, right? Like we talk almost every day, and you've told me for years how it feels to be a Sabres fan, yet I feel like I haven't even had a true taste of it yet.
I don't wish this upon most people, only Chiefs fans. This sucks. Like, the Jets fans are going through it too, and it's just depressing because, like, there's reasons for optimism. And you always used to tease me back in the Eichel era. I was like, this is the year we make the playoffs, and like because look at what they did when they left. Like, I wasn't that far off.
This is how I can tell how bad it is for you guys. Every year I used to like laugh at telling you, because you'd be optimistic. You'd be like, the Sabres are going to make the playoffs this year. Look how good they're playing. I'm like, watch them crash back down to earth. I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago, it wasn't funny anymore. I just started feeling bad. Once you start feeling bad and it's not even funny to make fun of them anymore, that's how you know you've hit basically rock bottom.
Yeah, and we keep finding new ways. We keep grabbing the shovel and digging down lower. So we'll see what happens this offseason. I think this offseason could be fun for me. Well, I hope it'll at least... I see, and here's the thing. I'm trying to say this will be a fun offseason and things are going to happen and blah, blah, blah. I can't even say that without pause, because nothing has shown me that they're going to do anything about it, that they're going to make a change. So, oh my God, we got to stop talking about the Sabres last, because I feel like we always end on a depressing note, dude.
Okay, well, to be fair, depressing note, the Sabres are on a 3-game win streak.
They are, and the Islanders are on a 7-game win streak, and the Red Wings are on a 5-game winning streak. And the Sabres are 11 points back of the Tampa Bay Lightning for a playoff spot. So, yeah, I mean, listen, we're just, I would say we're going through the motions.
Right, 11 points doesn't sound that bad, right? And they're last in the East. I think, again, that just shows how compact that bottom half of the East is.
Bottom of the West is 21 points back.
Yeah, exactly. That makes more sense.
11 points back would put the Sabres at 40, well, obviously, yeah, at 46 points, which is basically where Anaheim is. So think of us as the Anaheim Ducks of the Eastern Conference.
Okay. You know what? That maybe doesn't sound so great either. So maybe, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not good. Being at the bottom of the East, like, is not good. Obviously, Trevor Zegras, maybe they make a swing at him. There's a lot of rumors flying around about a lot of guys, and I think a lot of teams that... Because I even said this when we did, I know we're kind of running a bit long here, but when we were doing our season predictions, that I was saying, like, there's not many teams that have shown enough that they're going to jump in and knock somebody in the East out, right? And the same thing in the West. Like, I think I pretty much predicted run it back with the Western Conference, and it's pretty darn close. I think Vancouver makes it over Calgary, and that is the same playoff field as the year before. Yeah,
no, the big surprises here, I would say, are the Wild... and Calgary, even the Kings are playing a little better than expected, I think. But generally speaking, you're right. It's the same teams. And in the East, it's just the rebound of the Devils. And the Blue Jackets as well are a bit of the wild card. Outside of that, it's all the teams you'd expect. Oh, and the Senators, to be fair. The Senators have turned it around a little bit as well.
We'll see if the Senators are going to stay there. They've been hot recently, though. They're playing some good hockey. And it's just one of those things. It's like us, them, and Detroit. For years, it was our year. We're going to be the first one of the three to get our rebuilds finished. And Well, it's
Yeah.
Ottawa, so congratulations, Ottawa. We'll see if they end up staying in there. It's tight, right? Because Tampa Bay, I mean, Boston, Detroit, I don't know. We'll see. It'll be a fun one, but
Yeah.
what I was getting at was I think this could be one of the wildest off seasons the NHL has ever seen
Oh yeah.
because so many GMs, first of all, they're probably going to be on the hot seat. Second of all, with the cap being what it is, teams are probably going to be willing to take risks. We saw that happen when the NBA had their massive cap spike. We're not having the same kind of thing here, but we saw players move and big free agent signings and things like that. So I think a lot of these GMs are going to realize that in order to improve my team, I'm not going to be able to find free agents because a lot of these teams will be able to bring their guys back, which they may not have thought. So I think we're going to see trades, and I think like you talk about Trevor Zegras being on the trade block in Anaheim, Dylan Cousins, Owen Power in Buffalo, like we would not there that would have been unheard of just 2 years ago, right? So I think a lot of these GMs need to make a move. They feel like, hey, the established teams with the McKinnons and the McDavids and you know Dallas and Winnipeg and you know Vegas, those teams that are established, we need to do something to upset the apple cart here. And we got to make a splash. If it doesn't pan out, it doesn't pan out. But we're like the Sabres. If it doesn't pan out, is there really much further down to go than last in the East?
Last
right?
in the league.
Right. Well, they're fourth. They're in the bottom 5 again of the NHL. How many times I can do the math for you? I don't feel like it, but like how many times have we been bottom 5 in the NHL? If you make a trade and it completely blows up, oh well, you're still in the bottom 5 of the league. So do something.
No, absolutely. I agree. This is the time to take chances, and you know we've already seen just I think maybe an indicator, like you said, right? Is this last couple weeks you saw Rantanen get traded? That seemed unprecedented. Then JT Miller, and then the Pedersen deal. Like we've just seen deal after deal after deal. This little area here, and now it seems like it's affected the NBA as well with their massive deal. So we could see, like you said, one of the crazier off seasons we've had over the last decade, 2 decades even.
And, you know, I know this one was probably expected, but we saw the Stars acquired Granlund and Ceci, and we saw Farabee and Frost go for Kuzmenko and Pelchier.
Thank God the freaking there was rumors we were interested in Cody Ceci before Marcus Pettersson. Oh my goodness. Thank goodness. They pivoted. If we had acquired Cody Ceci, I might have stopped watching games this year.
That's a bit much.
Very possible.
No. But you know, like think about that. That is a lot of household names, and a lot of big deals flying about. And that was January. That was like the end of January. So we'll see here if this kind of momentum keeps up. Because like you're looking at all these names. There's a lot of names that you wouldn't have expected, and that's what I'm getting at, right? GMs are going to make moves. GMs have to do something, right? Maybe the Sabres trade Dylan Cousins for Trevor Zegras, and Zegras is just a better fit here or something. Because I think Zegras might have the higher ceiling. At least we've seen him have a higher ceiling as far as points per game than Dylan Cousins, right? He had those back-to-back years when he was 20 and 21. He's been injured a little bit and hasn't really been able to bounce back to form. But, I mean, hey, who knows? But I don't think that's a deal. I don't think it's on the table. But we'll see. It should be fun, I hope. And I hope we're a part of it.
And I think what else I kind of to point out that Farabee trade to Calgary is buyers are buying. We've seen the Canucks both buy and sell in order to buy, essentially, is what I'd call it. You've seen Calgary buy, and these teams are more on the fringe, right? We've seen Carolina technically buy, right? Or you could even argue Colorado tried to get more depth on their team by getting Jack Drury in that deal as well. You're seeing buyers buy, and I think while there aren't a ton of pieces on the market now, as teams get closer to realizing what exactly they are this season, I think it is a buyer's market both now, coming up to the trade deadline, and like you said, in the off season. You know, if you know your team isn't going to be a contender next year, that's your time to sell off those assets if they aren't, you know, protected with a no trade clause. So draft day as well. I think it's just next period of hockey where there will be trades allowed. So from now to the deadline, and then from the end of the Stanley Cup to the draft, and then beginning of free agency, I think it could be absolutely wild in terms of what we see.
I love big trades. I'd love to be part of one someday. Where we don't get fleeced, because the Eichel trade was not great. The Reinhart trade, not great. Although I think we got Kulik out of the Reinhart trade, so...
And you got UPL in one of them as well, right?
Levi.
It was Levi. Yeah.
Levi in a first, and that first turned into Kulik. So it was essentially Levi and Kulik for Sam Reinhart. I'd take Sam Reinhart in a cup over
Probably.
Kulik and Levi. But listen, man, I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully these changes make Vancouver more balanced, and you guys are able to go on a bit of a run here. I mean, 5-5-0 is well, it's not exactly ascending hockey for you guys. You're not falling off, but we'll see. I'm rooting for Elias Pettersson, future Buffalo Sabre Elias Pettersson. Hope he has a great season. So that's all the time we have for this one, guys. Thank you so much for listening. If you are listening on whatever podcasting platform you can find us on, we actually now have a new YouTube channel. We're the Expansion Bros podcast on YouTube, so you can find us there. Go ahead and subscribe, as well as hit us up on X, Expansion Bros on X as well. Abby, I had a good time. Lots of trades to talk about. Maybe the Sabres will make one. I don't know. Maybe we'll have to make an emergency pod because we are 2 teams traded, but we'll see. But thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll talk to you in the next one.
Peace.